and welcome to the Men on the Path to Love podcast. Why peace feels boring. Healing after a toxic relationship episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I coach men who are done suffering in their relationships. Men who want deeper love, real connection, and to finally feel like themselves again. I help men become the best version of themselves and for their current relationship or the one they're ready to find, so they can live the life they love. So if you've ever gotten out of a chaotic or toxic relationship and felt something surprising afterward, this episode might hit close to home for you. Because many men expect one main feeling after leaving a toxic relationship, and that is relief. And yeah, relief often comes, but something else can show up too. Something many men don't expect, and that's boredom, a sense of emptiness, a void, a strange sense that something is missing. And that can be confusing. Research in trauma psychology and relationship dynamics helps explain why this happens. When someone spends a long time in a high conflict or emotionally unpredictable relationship, their nervous system adapts to that environment. Studies on trauma bonding and intermittent reinforcement show that unpredictable cycles of reward and punishment, criticism followed by affection or distance followed by intimacy, create powerful psychological conditioning. And what happens with this dynamic is it activates the brain's dopamine reward system. Psychologist Patrick Carnes, who studied trauma bonding, found that relationships built on emotional volatility can become addictive because the brain becomes wired to expect that intensity rather than stability or calm. So when the chaos finally stops, our nervous system doesn't always trust or interpret peace and calm as safety. And sometimes it interprets peace as something missing. And that's where the feeling of boredom or emptiness or that void can show up. I remember experiencing something similar in my own life. Many years ago, after getting out of a toxic relationship, I initially felt this tremendous amount of relief, right? The criticism stopped, the tension stopped, the emotional landmines stopped. And for a while, it felt like I could finally breathe again. But after some time had passed, something unexpected showed up for me. I started feeling kind of bored. And that confused me because I knew that relationship had been unhealthy. But my nervous system had gotten used to the drama, to the tension and all that emotional chaos. And when all that stopped, there was this strange sense of emptiness, like something was missing. But here's what I found out in therapy, what was really happening. What I had been experiencing externally in that toxic relationship, the criticisms, the put-downs, all the negativity, well, I started turning inward on myself. That voice that used to come at me externally, my ex from my relationship, it started coming from inside my own head. I became critical of myself. I started putting myself down and beating myself up. And that's something that can happen after leaving a toxic relationship. The external critic disappears, but the internal critic takes over. And man, once I had that awareness, everything changed. I got to work on quieting that inner critic and loving myself in spite of all I had gone through and had gotten used to in that toxic, chaotic relationship. Now, in my work with men over the years, I've seen what I just described as my own experience and several other common experiences after leaving a toxic or chaotic relationship. A lot of the men have reported feeling bored or unstimulated, like I mentioned. They actually miss the intensity of the relationship, leaving them feeling emotionally flat or numb. They would find themselves questioning their own judgment. blaming themselves for what had happened, or feeling that strange void or that emptiness that I mentioned. And look, none of this means that the toxic relationship was healthy. It simply means that your nervous system got used to the chaos. And now it has to learn what peace actually feels like. I worked with a man, I'll call him Xavier, okay? He experienced this very thing. Xavier had been in what he described as a 6-year roller coaster ride. His relationship was filled with lies, accusations, manipulation, and that emotional roller coaster ride. But it also had moments of excitement. There was laughter, a lot of great sex, exotic vacations. The highs were high, but the lows were really low, almost devastating. And over time, the pain clearly outweighed the joy. Now, Xavier was a decent guy. And like all of us, he wasn't perfect, but he was a good man. And one thing he prided himself on was being faithful in relationships. When he committed, he committed. Yet, throughout the relationship, his partner constantly accused him of cheating. And he wasn't. And the accusations never stopped. She also used sex as a form of manipulation. Sometimes she would hold sex unless he did something she wanted, and other times she would use sex as a way to pull him back in. And Xavier often described feeling like he was mentally and emotionally treading water, never quite knowing what she wanted or what kind of mood she'd be in. And he was always trying to keep his head above water. Well, what finally woke Xavier up was something he discovered on her phone. She had gone on what she had called a girls-only cruise in the Caribbean. And when he later looked at her phone, he discovered pictures of her with another man. He also found a dick pic, and when he confronted her, she tried to explain it away. She said the guy had worked on the cruise ship and had just been helpful. As far as the dick pic was concerned, she claimed it had been sent by one of her girlfriends as a joke. Well, Xavier wasn't buying it. Something inside of him finally knew that he was done, and he ended the relationship. And shortly after the breakup, her sister confirmed what he had suspected. There had been multiple affairs throughout the relationship. And when he heard this, Xavier felt humiliated. And he told me later that he felt stupid for not seeing it sooner. And the thing was, it was all hindsight, because when you're in it, you're in it. And we often discover in hindsight that manipulation can cloud even the clearest mind, because we don't want to see the reality, and we become blind to it. Well, afterwards, Xavier started rebuilding his life. He began working out. He started eating healthier. He was meditating again. And for the first time in years, he finally felt peace. But after a while, something else showed up. He was like, "Bill, I feel bored." And I knew exactly what he was talking about. And he said at first he felt guilty for even saying it out loud. We stayed with that feeling because it was important. And I asked him a simple question. Did it make sense that after years of being on this emotional roller coaster, taking up so much of his mental and emotional bandwidth, that suddenly not having that stimulation anymore might feel like boredom by comparison? He paused and said something interesting. He said, I never thought about it like that. Yeah, so we got to work. And the first step, which you hear me saying a lot, was compassion. Having compassion for what he had gone through and put up with, frankly, and for how long he had tried to make the relationship work. Then we focused on helping him rebuild his internal foundation. We worked on him learning to be comfortable in his own company, getting clear about his values, establishing stronger relationship standards, That was a big one. Identifying the red flags that he had overlooked, helping him develop healthier boundaries, rebuilding trust in himself, and working on his emotional awareness, strengthening his emotional awareness, and ultimately creating a life that felt meaningful even without being in a relationship. And the goal wasn't to help Xavier avoid another toxic relationship. The goal was to help him become the kind of man who chooses differently. Now, what I appreciated about Xavier was eventually he realized something important. What he had once mistaken for excitement in relationship was actually instability. And what he initially mistook for boredom after the breakup was actually peace. Yeah, his nervous system simply needed time to recalibrate. Because a healthy relationship doesn't feel like a roller coaster. It feels like solid ground. And if you've spent years riding emotional highs and lows, that solid ground can feel unfamiliar and strange at first. So what can you do if you've left a toxic relationship and feel that void? This is in no particular order. They're all relevant. You'll want to normalize the experience. In other words, it's understanding, again, that your nervous system is adjusting. It likes what's familiar, even if it's not good for us. And that peace often feels unfamiliar after all that chaos. And so it's normal to feel that way. Have patience and grace as you transition through this. Another thing to focus on is rebuilding your identity, because toxic relationships often consume our mental space, causing us to lose sight of our identity, our true selves. So you want to work on reclaiming your identity, who you are outside of a relationship, getting clear about your values, setting standards, know what you will and won't accept moving forward, and live by that for yourself and for your relationships. And going back to normalizing your experience and giving yourself grace, again, have compassion for yourself and what you went through. Start to replace any of that internal criticism, that inner critic, with compassion and understanding. It's not self-pity, woe is me. No, it's through recognizing the truth that what you went through was hard and painful. And also work on reframing your negative thoughts to take a more positive spin. The whole glass half full kind of thing. And it's understanding the difference between peace and boredom. Peace is not emptiness, even though it may feel that way at first. Peace is the stability your nervous system hadn't learned yet. Yeah, the more you accept and embody peace, the more your nervous system will respond accordingly. And again, be patient with yourself here. So those are just some of the ways you can transition after getting out of that toxic or chaotic relationship. And if you would like some additional support with this, by all means, visit my website, menonthepathtolove.com. You'll find resources, coaching opportunities, and tools designed specifically to help men rebuild themselves and create healthier relationships moving forward. All right, let's get to my quote of the week. And this one hits the nail right on the head, man. It's from psychologist and relationship expert Nedra Glover Tawwab. It says, quote, "The quiet after chaos can feel strange, but it is often the beginning of real healing," unquote. Yeah, and with that healing and doing the work, peace will feel more natural, and you won't accept anything else. And that will do it for this episode of the Men on the Path to Love podcast, Why Peace Feels Boring, Healing After a Toxic Relationship episode. I'm Bill Simpson, your host. I thank you for listening. So here's something for you to think about. Have you ever felt like you were doing the work, doing the personal growth and the healing and all that, but somehow it felt like you were going backwards instead of forward? Well, that's what I'll be talking about next time. Because sometimes personal growth doesn't feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like you're going backwards. And there's a reason for that. So please join me for Why Personal Growth Sometimes Feels Like You're Going Backwards episode. And if you found this episode helpful, or you know someone you think needs to hear it, by all means, like I always say, please share the link to this podcast and share the love. And until next time, keep your heart open and stay on the path to love.